come, the idea of giving up anything other than personal responsibility is quite simply a non-runner. And it seemed to me that succinct little statement is very aptly descriptive, not only of British society, but of much more, the see it, want it, have it society. If we're going to be responsible as Christian stewards, and if we're going to give an example to others, then we need a different philosophy to that. Let's pray together. Father, you have already challenged us about having our resources focused on heaven, because where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. You've already spoken to us about our responsibility for giving, to bring all the tithes into the storehouse and see whether you will not pour out on us a blessing such as we shall not be able to receive. We have faced together and individually after our sessions some of the particular problems that we face, and we know for how many people the issue of debt and the burden and the worry of it is such a high-profile issue. We pray that we may gain wisdom as we listen to experience this morning and share together. Guide and bless us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. We will have the opportunity, as we have in the previous two sessions, for some brief time for questions and comments. And Keith was just making the point to me a moment ago that perhaps even more particularly than yesterday or this afternoon, the issues that he'll be covering today may mean that you will want to make maximum use of this time at the front here, where Keith will be available and Sue, his wife, who works with him, and do avail yourself of the opportunity for a one-to-one talk if you would like to. But glad to welcome Keith again. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thanks so much for being here. I can assure you that there'll be quite a few people here on this camp who perhaps should be here, but will not be here because they are so afraid of their debt issue that they are afraid of addressing it. They're afraid of the difficult choices that may have to take place. And of course, it's not just for one's own position. This is such a colossal issue. If you want to know how to reach out into your neighborhood, whatever your neighborhood is, being able to help people with debt issues and money management issues is undoubtedly the number one issue that is being faced by many people. The Debt Commissioner, when we reported last year, I was one of the 7 debt commissioners, estimated that around 1 in 3 houses struggle to make ends meet. I don't know whether you know that 43% of Barclaycard's profits last year were made through late payments. People struggling, not even able to make the minimum payments on time. So if we really want to be practical and we really want to get our hands dirty, then it's a great way of being able to reach out to other people and help them. And obviously at the same time, because we have a different value system, as people start to ask questions to us, we've got a lot of things we can say to them that will actually perhaps steer people down a route that will give them hope, not just practical hope, but eternal hope as well. So let me start by asking a couple of questions. Again, these are questions that you do not have to shout out loud to, probably in my case and some others, thankfully. When a credit card statement arrives, do you open it immediately and pay it on time? Do you open it at a later date but still just about get round to paying it? Do you forget about it or only pay the minimum payment at the last possible moment? Do you only pay anything when you're threatened by court action? Do you know what the current interest rate is on your mortgage, on your credit cards, on your store cards? Can be anything up to 30%. on a store card, although the Competition Commission, which I spoke to, have recently reported, and that's likely, I think, to drift down somewhat in the next few months. Do you know, when you add it up, what your outstanding debts total? The amazing thing is, I can assure you that a typical call on the helpline will be, you've got to help me, I've got 2 or 3 debts and I owe about £10,000. When you work it out, they will have about 10 debts, and what they owe will be about £25,000. Most people do not know how much they owe, or perhaps do not want to know. And when they see the full picture, the first reaction is, oh no, please don't tell me it's that much. We don't want to know. And so it's a difficult issue. How many credit cards do you own? You know, 30 years ago, there was one credit card, Barclaycard. Today, if you include all the affinity cards, and of course the Christian affinity cards, there's a choice of over 4,000 different cards you can have. The highest number we know of one person having is 85 different cards. Literally a pack of cards, using one card to pay off another. Do you regularly save money? Interesting, today is A-Day. Many people don't know what A-Day is. A-Day is this new amazing pension day where you can start your new pensions and have all sorts of exciting tax reliefs. You're only, by the way, allowed to put into your pension a rather small sum of money, maximum number, 215,000. I don't think many of us will be too worried about that particular restriction. But that's what's happening today, because they're trying to say, save, save, save. But they're also saying our society needs to be fluent and buoyant, so you've got to keep spend, spend, spend at the same time. And if you're a student, particularly, to get on in life, the best thing to do is to borrow. So you have to borrow for tuition fees and loans. So borrow, 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 and spend, 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 and save, save, save. Doesn't really add up, does it? So that's the situation. What would you do if you had a windfall of £50,000 today? Would you use it to pay off all your debts? Would you use some for debt repayment and immediately go and spend the rest? Would you save it all because you haven't got any money? Any debts, so you could just save it all? Or would you flee the country? Which is an increasingly big temptation. What does the Bible say about debt? Critical issue, lots to say about it. You see, people who are in financial bondage are preoccupied with money. They're worried about how they're going to meet their current obligations. They're constantly driven to strive for more. I just need that bit, then this will happen, then that will happen. But current circumstances and the attitude of the creditor dictates where your, in inverted commas, money goes. The more you owe, the more other people are telling you how this money should be spent. That's why Proverbs 22:7 says, the borrower is the slave of the lender. And millions of people in Britain, many Christians in Britain, are shackled by excessive debt and the misuse of money. In Britain, we have 75% of European personal debt. That's how much we owe. As I said to you yesterday, the amount that we owe personally, more than the third world debt across the world added together. And our personal debt is still growing at every 4 minutes, £1 million more. Which is why recently Mr. and Mrs. Average Great Britain, think about this for a minute, it sounds funny, but when you think about it, it actually is quite serious. Mr. and Mrs. Average Great Britain have been described as somebody driving on a government bond financed road in a bank financed car, fueled by credit card financed petrol, going to buy store cards financed furniture to put in their mortgage financed house. That's where we are. And Christians' responsibility is you can borrow. Romans 13:8 says, let no debt remain outstanding. There's nothing wrong in borrowing as long as that borrowing is sensible, as long as that borrowing isn't to glorify you. So if you're buying a house, you're buying a home and not a statement. And that we borrow and we try and repay as fast as we possibly can. So the day you get out of debt is a wonderful day. You see, Debt, by the way, what would you do? You know, you get these wonderful letters which say, would you like £5,000 of credit? What would you do if you got back if you got a letter which said, would you like £5,000 of debt? You throw it away. But it's the same thing. But because it says, would you like £5,000 of credit, you think, oh, that's lovely, isn't it? Oh, I'm credit worthy. People think I'm really valuable. I think I'll have some of that. But it's the same thing. Debt and credit make assumptions about tomorrow. You're assuming you will be able to repay your debt out of your future income. God may have different plans for you. Things change. People lose jobs, get ill, have babies, have relationship breakdown, etc., etc. Listen to James 4:13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year or two there, carry on business and make some money. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're just a mist that appears for a little while and then you vanish. Instead, you ought to be praying, if it's the Lord's will, we will live this and do that. So we need to cling on to what God says, not what our consumer society tells us to do. That is the critical issue. The amount, as I said, of money that is growing is absolutely huge. And it's growing by about £10 billion every month. That's £billion how much we owe. And it will continue to get worse and worse and have dramatic adverse impact in our relationships, with our families, with our other halves, with our workplace, with our friends. And we look at that this morning. In Germany, there are currently around 4 million credit and store cards. In France, it's 11 million. In Britain, it's 76 million, compared, as I said, to a population of around 60 million. About 35% of the interest rate that credit and store cards charge is to pay for other people's bad debts. So you may think, well, it serves some of these lenders right if they lend irresponsibly. Oh, no, it doesn't. They build into their charges the interest rate so that the people who are paying are actually paying for those that don't pay. Did you know that many people are so struggling with even the basics of money? It's such a complicated subject, but we don't even understand the basics. An OFT survey several years ago asked, what does APR mean? That's the interest rate. What does it mean? More people thought it meant you paid in April than could tell you what it actually meant. It means annual percentage rate, and you might argue, so what? APR is purely a comparative tool. The higher it is, usually the worse it is. And as I said yesterday, I think even if you've got a credit card, you're likely to spend about a third more in a year than if you don't. So what can we do to help people? Because there are millions of people in our churches, in our communities, we've got a huge project on at Credit Action to reach the financially excluded in money issues, help them avoid debt, help them get out of debt. We're talking about 2.5 million households we've got to reach. That's a lot of people. It's a huge task, it's quite an onerous task, it's quite a challenging task, it's quite an exciting task. But we need Christians, we need people who will be volunteers with us to help us move in this particular area and help reach out to the most vulnerable in our society. So there are lots of things that we can do. You can put a poster up all around in churches, in doctor surgeries, in community centres, 1,000,001 places that you've got contacts to let people know that they can get free debt counselling. The number, by the way, of the Consumer Credit Counselling Service, let me give you that before I forget to put that out, but again, get in touch with Credit Action so we can give you these cards, is 0800 138 1111. Totally free counselling from beginning to end, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And so you can put things in your church newsletter. You can put posters out. What many churches do is buy our manuals. They buy them in bulk, buy them in bulk from us at cost, and then distribute them with your name and address on the back. into schools, because we have guides for school leavers, we have guides for students. Some universities now take one per fresher. So there's lots that can be done in that sort of area. Maybe you want to set up a church hardship fund for people in your church who are really struggling with money. And there needs to be rules on that, such as, if somebody's going to borrow from it, they agree that their finances are looked at by an expert in the church who can help with the budgeting. There's probably a limit that you can only apply once a year. You can only apply for a certain sum of money. But because some people get into debt because they don't have enough money, others, if they were helped with the management of that money, would not be in a bad situation. So that's a critical issue. Have you run Bible courses? We saw yesterday that hardly anybody here had even heard of any teaching on money, even though it's the second most talked about subject in the Bible after love. And yet, as I say, very, very little teaching on it. And we have Christian courses and outreach courses on money. So again, get in touch with Credit Action on 01522 699 777, and we will be able to help you. I believe the bookshop should be stocking today my book where the teaching is coming out of Your Money and Your Life. So that too could be a useful thing. But a whole range of things that we need to do. But one of the things we all have to grasp is the more we go shopping, the more we will spend. The more we watch television, the more we will spend. The more we look at catalogues, the more we will spend. The more we read magazines and newspapers, the more we will spend. And the more we read God's word, the more we will give. Fascinatingly, we will all see about 3,000 adverts a day. I was talking last year at a conference. The head of the Salvation Army was there. He came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the guy who wrote that book about money." He said, "I read your chapter on consumerism every 2 weeks," which I was a bit of a shock because I certainly don't. And I said, "Well, that's amazing." He said, "Yes." He said, "I know every time I pick up the newspaper, I go down the high street, I get on the tube. You need this, you need this, you need this." We're absolutely indoctrinated. And, we just don't know it. I don't know about you, I'm feeling tired. Should we have a break, have a Kit Kat? It's all in there. We remember this. One of the days when I do whole day seminars with Christians, I just start the day, I'm very, keep my face very straight, I have a dry sense of humour. Okay, you've got 10 minutes to write down all the Bible verses you know. I don't necessarily mean off by heart, but roughly what, John 3:16 or Romans 8:28 says. Most people get to between 15 and 20. Okay, write down the number of adverts you know in the same time. May give them a suggestion. Have you thought about food? Have you thought about drink, cars? Most people will get to between 150 and 200 adverts that they know. When you're doing it in non-Christian audiences, they can write non-stop for 20 minutes and have lists of 500 or 600 different products of adverts. That's our society. That's what we're competing against. Now, people borrow in different ways. There's 4 sorts of credit. There's, first of all, the secure credit. That doesn't mean, by the way, you feel nice and secure because you've borrowed some money. It means it's credit that's secured against something. So if you don't pay, you could lose your house or your car, for example. The interest rates on that are slightly lower because obviously the lender has quite a lot of clout. He can get his money back if something goes wrong. Then there's unsecured lending, like an overdraft or a credit card. So if you don't pay, the worst that somebody can do is take you to court, maybe get to bailiffs around. There's fixed-term lending, like a mortgage, 25 years. You pay what you're supposed to pay over that 25-year period. At the end of it, it's gone. Then the last sort of credit is called revolving credit, which is revolving credit, which basically goes round and round. And so, you borrow something on month 1, you get charged interest. For whatever reason, you don't pay. So on month 2, not only do you get charged interest on what you borrowed, but you get charged interest on the interest. And as I said yesterday, if you borrow and you only pay the minimum amount, you borrow something like £3,000, it'll take you getting on for 50 years to pay that off because of the accumulation of interest. It's a difficult issue. And it's a particularly difficult issue if you're struggling with low income. I'm sure that everybody here will know people on benefits, whether they're retired, whether they're unemployed, whether they're ill. These are some figures that talks about an average income family and what they're spending at the moment on various categories compared to a benefit family. An average income family is currently spending £72 on food. A benefit family is spending £32 on food. The figures for utilities are £18 and £15. Not very much difference, you might think, until you realise, of course, if you're unemployed or sick, you're at home all day long needing heating and light. The figures for cigarettes are interesting. An average income family is currently spending £5 on cigarettes. A benefit family is spending £10. Does the smoking cause the debt, or does the stress of debt cause the smoking? Interesting. Other day-to-day goods, like washing stuff, anything that's not food. Average income family is spending £31 a week. Benefit family can afford to spend £6. What about household goods? An average family currently spending £27 a week on this particular figure. The benefit family spends £3. Which basically, of course, means that they're probably not paying their TV licence. I sit as a magistrate, 9 out of 10 people, when we have no TV licences, will be single parents, because they can't afford to pay a TV licence. Clothing, the figures are £30 and £4. Transport, the figures are £66 and £6, which again means that if you're unemployed, you can't afford to insure your car. So what do you say to somebody who lives 20 miles away from the nearest public transport? That you're stuck there for the rest of your time. Incredible issues that we need to be thinking through. But what that basically means is that if you've got little income, it really is a huge struggle. And there are so many things in the church that we need to be doing practically, both within the church but within our communities, to help people in these areas make their money stretch as far as they possibly can. Helping them by taking them shopping, by babysitting, by doing 101 things that they otherwise could not afford to do. And our faith will grow and our evangelism will grow once we start really loving and caring people that we come across in this particular way. So there's no formula, there's just love. Every one of us will have a credit rating. I don't know whether you know this, that there is a file about every single one of us in the country, probably several files with different credit reference agencies. Tells you all sorts of things about yourself, where you live, for some unknown reason, whether you've got a telephone, whenever you borrow money, where you bank, what is happening, and if you miss payments. So whenever you apply for credit, it's checked, your record is checked. If you get it's done on a traffic light system, so if you miss a couple of payments, you get an orange light, and if you beyond that, you get a red light, and that stops you borrowing again. There are some firms that will lend to you in those circumstances, but at hugely exorbitant rates of interest. They're pretty complicated forms. I got one for when I was writing a review about them, and I struggled to understand it myself. So they're not very easy, but it does mean that if you get a credit restriction, you are in fact embargoed from getting mainstream credit for 6 years, which is a long time. And particularly now, people in their early to mid-20s, with the cost of university and whatever, getting into debt, not knowing what to do, failing to pay, 3 or 4 years later, maybe wanting to settle down, get on the housing ladder, but certainly wanting to borrow, they're unable to do so because they have 6 years to wait. What does debt feel like? Well, let me just give you some quotes that we've had from letters and phone calls over the years. I can't make it through the month without going overdrawn. My bank balance has disappeared. I pay the minimum due and sometimes even less on my credit card every month. I'm behind on my payments. I'm up to my maximum borrowing limit. I don't have any savings account. Did you know half the adult population in this country have liquid savings, things they can get their hands on, of under £250? I survive each month thanks only to overtime. I sometimes have to borrow to pay mainstream bills like tax or insurance. I have to use my credit cards to get cash. I haven't got a clue how much I owe. I juggle my bills, paying one creditor one week, another, and the next. I get threatening letters and phone calls. I worry about my bills. We have family fights about money. Money is making me physically ill. I can't sleep because I'm worrying about my financial situation. We've just heard a minute or two ago about very poor people. Let me tell you another extreme. On a helpline recently, a specialist chemist was earning £150,000 a year, £3,000 a week. And he lost his job. And he came on to one of the counsellors who rang me about this story afterwards. And he said, my specialisation has gone. I will never be able to be employed. Something has taken over it. And I've gone from being on £3,000 a week to £98 a week. I need help. And my counsellor started to say, yes, you need help with budgeting. No, I need help with my debts. But you're earning £150,000 a year. That's right. Okay, the counsellor said, could you just start with your creditors? How much do you owe on your credit cards? £73,000. See, the more we earn, the more we borrow. Seems to be the way of it. All government figures indicate that the more people earn, the bigger a higher number of credit cards they have. That is the situation that we have. Let's think for a second of some of the causes of debt. People get into debt through the benefit system. It's so complicated, there's so many forms, there's actually a form to tell you which form you need. And have you tried to read them? You know, the form for the blind is 12 pages long, and it's not written in Braille. Is that clever? It is so complicated. About a third of tax credits are not claimed. Some of the elderly, we've dealing with a case recently of an 85-year-old and 88-year-old sisters. They applied for carer's allowance and attendance allowance. The carer, was actually sent a letter back saying 2 months later, sorry, you can't have it. Why not? She threw it away. I asked, let's ring up and find out why not. Well, because your other sister hasn't been given an attendance allowance yet. Why not? There's a 3-month waiting list. Is that a way to treat an 85-year-old and an 88-year-old? Absolutely crazy. The student loan system. Young people struggling with money, you will get into debt. But don't let that worry you. Student loans are meant to enable you to be able to earn more over life. I disagree with this system totally. My own view is if you earn more in life, you pay more tax. But nonetheless, that is what is being done. So do not let it stop you working. Do not let it stop you going to university. Try and clear it off as much as you can. Try and get a job in some of the holidays to do that. But work on that. Seek help from that. There are access funds, hardship funds at universities. Our helpline has specialist people to do with university students. People get get into debt through illness, through loss of overtime, loss of commission, loss of job. A new baby can, as we had a case on the Times recently I was writing for, mean both a loss of income and an increase in spending at the same time. Low pay, as we've seen, will cause debt. Death of a relative. People not being aware of income expenditure. We do not budget. We do not know where money goes. And I always say to people, what the best thing to do when you're budgeting is for a month, get a notebook and write down absolutely everything, and that means, by the way, absolutely everything, you spend your money on. Because it's amazing. People think, I go into work and I stop at Starbucks and have a coffee and I take another coffee in and a sandwich and cake for lunch. It's only £4.50. That's £100 a month. Yeah, it can't be that. Well, why don't you buy a flask and make your own sandwiches? There's lots of things that can be done. People are addictive. There are millions of people in our society who have addictive personalities. I think I've probably got one. But addictive personalities where it's very tempting to spend something on a certain, get carried away with something, and then you suddenly find you're addicted to it. People, by the way, a lot of people, so depressed about their debt that they go out to buy themselves something to cheer themselves up and end up more in debt. And that's how it revolves. We try and keep up with the Joneses. Why? But that's what we do, because that's what life is all about. That's what adverts tell us. You can't live happily if you don't drive that sort of car or eat that sort of chocolate. And we've bought into this, and we believe it, and it's percolated and penetrated our Christian life so much so that we too feel the same thing and can react in the same particular way. So what is the response to this sort of debt? What do people feel like? Fear, guilt, shame, loneliness, insecure, suicidal, ashamed, depressed. Every negative emotion you can think of is how people feel like when they're in debt. And every month that goes by and they're owing more money, they feel worse and worse. As I say, relate saying, somewhere between 70 and 80% of relationships are not breaking down because of infidelity or anything else. They're breaking down because of money issues. People won't talk to each other. There's child abuse. NSPCC ran a brilliant advert. All it says is this: when dad's behind on the mortgage, it's the kids who end up paying. Because rational people do irrational things under constant stress. You have the health issues. I've been talking to government ministers. They're saying that debt is actually costing the health service billions of pounds every year, with 1 in 4 people in debt going, I've got a headache, I've got a backache, well, I'm really stressed. What are you stressed by? Money. Which is why there's even some doctor surgeries now giving debt counselling in doctor surgeries, and why there are leaflets and booklets that we use that are widely used over there. There's a loss of self-esteem because life's all about success and having money and doing this. And if you think you're going to have to cut your lifestyle back, have a slightly cheaper holiday or no holiday even, well, is life worth living? Well, of course it is. But that is what society says, no, it can't be. You always have more. You lose your friends. We've had people say to us, well, we couldn't go around to dinner with our friends anymore because, they'd give us a 4-course meal and then we'd have to ask them back. And, we couldn't afford to feed them. Or even people saying, I can't go down the pub anymore with my mates because I can't afford my round of drinks. And then you have suicide cases. We dealt extensively with a case with a family whose husband had committed suicide last year. It was featured very extensively in The Guardian. People just get to the end of their tether and they just see no way out. And they think, this is it, I can't cope anymore, or my family will be better off without me if this debt dies with me. Totally irrational. You can imagine how distraught people are feeling. Why didn't he share this with me? How has this been able to happen? I told you yesterday about the story of the army guy that I had who was so distraught. What had happened was he had built up significant debts, hadn't told his wife. On the Monday he was at work. His wife had opened the post thinking that it was about something she'd ordered, to find a letter from a bailiff. She went into his private stuff and found lots more. And she was just so ashamed at how much debt he'd built up and why he hadn't told her, that she basically took the children and left. So he was distraught about that. On the Thursday, a creditor had rung him and said, you're going to pay in full today, otherwise we're going to let the army know. And in the armed forces, debt can be a dismissal offence. So he suddenly thought, I've lost my wife, I've lost my child, I'm going to lose my home, losing my job, I have nothing to live for. He went into Samaritans in a very distressed state in Glasgow. And I ended up having a 6-hour phone call with him as he was holding a loaded pistol to his head. You get these sort of circumstances. You get a circumstance where a chap came on the helpline, he's very, very distraught. He was put through to me. I began to calm him down, and after about 20 minutes, he said, will you please talk to my wife? I said, yes, of course I will. Put her on the phone. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, I live in Maidstone in Kent. I'm ringing you from Telford. I don't know where I've been for 3 days. I rang her up. She thought she was beside herself. She thought he'd killed himself. It took me 7 hours talking to one, talking to the other, before they'd even talk to each other. That is what happens. I had 2 girls last year at university prostituting to try and survive their university terms. Absolutely heartbreaking to see these sort of issues. I had a lady at one of the biggest churches in this country. I was speaking, and people coming up to see me afterwards, and she said, well, my situation, very well-dressed lady about my age, said, I lost my job some time ago and I've been struggling. I said, okay, let's go through your spending. And we sure did. I said, okay, let's now just make sure you're getting the right benefits. She said, oh, well, I haven't got any income. I said, well, why aren't you claiming benefits? Well, aren't they for poor people? And I said to her, excuse me, do you mind if you just open your purse for me? And she started to cry. She said, sorry, there's nothing in it. I said, can I just ask you when you last ate? She said, oh yes. She said, I remember. She said, a friend gave me a donut on Thursday. It was Sunday night. And I was so cross. I may have used one or two non-Christian words at that church. I kicked up such a stink. And I went back to my church the following Sunday and found an identical situation in my own church. So that taught me something. Probably the most amazing thing, I was in a church in Nottingham some years ago. Evening service, 120 people there. Finished speaking, and the vicar said, let's have a question and answer session. He said, I'm quite convinced that, there's anybody here in Dare, I can't believe it, it's the most affluent part of Nottingham. And I said, well, given the numbers here, I'm sure there will be. He said, look, I really, I don't believe there'll be anybody here in debt. And a girl of about 25 stood up and said, I'm sorry, but you don't know your congregation very well. And the vicar said something like, oh, Daisy, I haven't seen you here for some months. True pastoral care there, you see. And I never will forget her reply. She said, no, you haven't seen me, but about a year ago, John and I had a little baby because he was baptized shortly after that. But then we were already in debt, and then John lost his job, and we were building up debts, hundreds of pounds every month, and we started to fight and fight and fight. And things got so bad that 3 months ago, I took my baby home to be with my mum. And the reason we haven't been to church is because I haven't been able to afford the bus fare. And the reason that John and I are here tonight, because it's the last chance we think we have of saving our marriage. And I was looking at this that before that whole service, there'd been no reaction to anything I said. I thought, this is really hard work. And as I looked at this group, I suddenly saw maybe 8 or 10 people going down on their knees in prayer. Where this couple were, they were just hugged and held, and everybody was crying. And then as I looked round, there were probably 8 people. Do you know what they were doing? They were writing checks. And I suddenly thought, my goodness me, this is the body of Christ at work. Prayer, love, support, practical action. And I thought, I'll wait a minute or two, then I'll carry on. And I waited a minute or two more. I just picked my notes up and went home. It didn't need me anymore. That's what debt can do. How do we avoid it? How do we help people? Well, we need to budget. Budgeting is simply a question of working out our income, working out our spending, and then feeling happy or sad. Most of us feel pretty sad. When we budget, it's basically a question of, we must include everything so we don't forget hidden debts. We make miscellaneous spending as little as possible, because usually when people talk to you, it's the biggest item that they have. And they plan gift giving. So, if there's Christmas coming up, birthdays coming up, holidays, budget for it. Don't let it creep up unannounced. When you budget, it gives an accurate picture of what your financial situation is. You know, perhaps for the first time, where your money is going, and you can compare that to your priorities to see, does this actually fit? Almost certainly, it will enable you to reduce your spending. Not necessarily huge amounts, but it could be enough. And of course, if you are in debt, you will need to send a budget to your creditors to show them why you can't pay what you should, in theory, have been paying. So talk to your partner about it. Make sure that everybody who's spending knows all about it. Do you believe me? I hope you do, because I'm going to ask you. I hope between you in little groups you'll have access to at least one pen and a bit of paper, because I'm now going to ask you to do some budgeting. It's going to do this in record timing, but I want you to think of something now. I want you to imagine, don't imagine who you are or how old you are. Imagine that you're in your early 40s, you're married, you've got 2 children, you're not Christian. Okay? That's what you're imagining. I want you to write down a figure that you think this family of 4, husband, wife, 2 children, will spend extra, that's over and above what they normally spend, in the 3 weeks between the 10th of December and the 1st of January just gone by. How much do you think they'll spend extra? Over and above what they normally spend. Okay, you've thought about that. Now you put that to the back of your mind, or you turn a bit of paper over. And if just where you are, if you could talk to somebody near to you and start discussing, forget, as I say, just what we've done, just talk now about what you think this family could spend extra purely on food. And somebody will need to make a note as we add some figures up. What do you think they will spend on food? So not the beans and bread they buy every week, but the turkey and the hams and the mince pies and the Christmas puddings. Just write down a figure very briefly, in very brief discussion, maybe of 10 or 15 seconds, what you think that figure would be. One of the reasons I've done this is because to do it in groups is that people will have different views. Can I just ask you, first of all, are there any husbands and wives here? Okay, if you could do it together, I like a good row. That's good. Okay, we've done our food, and there will be disagreements. There's bound to be. This is the whole point of doing a budgeting exercise together. You've eaten your food. Okay, what about drinking your drink? Will there be wine over Christmas? Will there be lots of more soft drinks? What about champagne or whiskey for the new year? What's your family going to spend on drink? Okay, I'm sorry to rush you. Let's assume you've now drunk your drink. Nice little item now for you. What's your family going to spend on presents? Presents for family, other family members, friends. What do you want your family to spend on presents? Okay, hopefully now you've bought all your presents, so a smaller item I would imagine. Christmas cards and stamps. What are they going to spend on Christmas cards and stamps? Okay, hopefully now you've posted your cards. The next thing is travel. Will some of your family be, or all of the family be travelling elsewhere to see other relatives? Or will they perhaps, as more and more people seem to be doing, going on holiday during some of this period? What's your family going to do with regard to travel? Okay, hopefully you've now completed your journeys. So the next thing is going out. This could be like family trips to the pantomime, but it could be there's a staff dinner. You drink some wine at the staff dinner. You need to get a taxi home because you've drunk too much wine at the staff dinner. The male of the species may desire he wants a new outfit for the staff dinner. That's being sexist there. What do you think going out will come to? Okay, you'll be pleased to know this is the last but one item. I know this will be hard for you because you're a very spiritual lot. What traditionally happened on December the 26th but now starts even earlier? Thank you very much. What's your family going to spend in the sales in this period? Okay, well, you've now been to the sales, so the last item, yes, it's your favourite, it's miscellaneous. What are we going to spend on things like the Christmas tree and crackers and decorations? And just put a figure down for that. Then, once you've done that, if you could add up the figures, but please don't include the figure you thought of in the first place. If you could just add everything up now, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Okay, are we all added up? I can see somebody in the front needs a calculator. Okay, now, first of all, let me say, there is no right or wrong answer to this. It depends on what you can afford and how much you want to spend, etc., within your financial remit at one level. Would you like to know about this? Let's ask that first question about what actually people guessed. Anybody guess a figure of under £500? Thank you. Anybody guess a figure of over £1,500? Thank you. Over £2,000? Thank you. Over £2,500? Thank you. So quite a good spread. When you added it up, did anybody come to a figure of under £500? Under £1,000? Under £1,500? Yeah, the odd hands going up. Anybody come to a figure of over £2,500 when you added it up? Over £3,000? Over £3,500? If you could just give us the address of the party, that would be excellent. Okay. No right or wrong answer. Would you like to know what was spent? What was spent last year for a family during that period was £1,140 per person. Per person. So in this case, it would have been about £4,500. Now, amazing, you might think, and it certainly is, but the problem is that 99.9% of us do not save a penny for Christmas. Say we'd saved £300 a month, so at the end of the year we had £3,600, and it only cost us £3,000. We'd be fine, we've still got £600 in the bank. But if you save nothing, and then you spend £4,000, you're going to have to pay £4,000. Now, say you could afford to, say you got a good salary, really good salary, and you could afford to pay £3,000 of it off. So you'd borrow £4,000 and you repaid £3,000. What sum of money would you be charged interest on? You would think £1,000. It isn't true. If you do not pay your card off in full, you'll be charged interest on the full amount you borrow. So you would be charged interest on £4,000, even if you repaid £3,900 of it. That is why this time of year, February, March, April, all debt counselling agencies are swamped, because interest on that, you can imagine, is colossal. And so it goes on, and so it goes on. And there are millions of people now who will not have paid for Christmas 2004 on their credit cards. So it's critical. I need to close and leave a little bit of time for questions. Communication is key. First person, as I say, you need to communicate with is yourself. May sound silly, but what really is your position? What are your assets? What are your liabilities? What's your income? Where's your spending? Looking at the debts, getting a true picture. Communicate with your partner. As I said yesterday, husbands and wives speak different languages. But we need to be talking and bringing that together and accepting it and working through what we can do. Talking to creditors. Creditors can't be sympathetic to your case if they don't know what your case is. But explaining to them, if you've had a crisis, they could be having a crisis too. We had a case not very long ago. A call went in total distress to a radio station, and they rang me and said, this is the situation. Somebody's husband had a brain hemorrhage at the age of 34. He was like a vegetable, and he owned one big sum on his credit card, and she made some offers, and they kept writing back to say, we can't deal with you, you've got to deal with him. And she would write back and say, you can't deal with him because he's in the vegetable, he can't deal with this. So they would write back to him and say, get him to sign his signature. And they would write back and say, he can't write. And she was getting nowhere. And I managed to get through. I prayed like mad and through to someone and I explained what had happened. And this lady said, well, this is totally, haven't really got company policy for this, but could you just let her know? I'm going to talk to my senior management, but we will accept the offer that she's made. So I rang back, and she was delighted. She said, I'm so glad to get all this hassle. I'll start paying them £50 a month. It's really a struggle, but that's what I'm going to do. That's what I offered, and that's what I'll do. Carried on writing my article. Phone rang 40 minutes later. I picked up the phone, and all I could hear, so I get choked up, all I could hear was sobbing. And she just said, she kept saying, thank you. I said, it's fine, it's fine. No, she said, they've just rung up. They've written every penny of it off. Creditors will be kind, often, if they are genuine cases, so don't be afraid. We need to talk to tax people, we need to talk to benefits agencies, we need to talk to advisors. Everything that Credit Action does can help you and people that you'll be coming across with money issues. There's all sorts of possibilities. But debt is not the end of the world. The first step that people take towards getting out of debt is the biggest issue, but it's something that we can all do to help. People will thank you. It's amazing. I go around and people will talk to me and say, you don't know, but you spoke to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or I did something about my debt then, and now my position is so much clearer. And it is such a great, great weight off one's shoulders when debt goes. And suddenly you can start living your life again. And we at Credit Action, at Stewardship Credit Action, want to be able to offer hope to people. Yes, practical hope, but we want to be able to steer people to eternal hope as well. They go hand in hand. But we don't see people as notches on our evangelical post, if you like. What we're wanting is to help people because they're made in God's image. And I'm sure that many of you today, by going back to your churches and your communities, can make a huge difference to people's lives. Not just to them, and not just yourself, and not just today. You can make a huge difference for eternity's sake. Thank you very much. And hopefully, just a little time for questions. This afternoon I'm going to be in Cracker Jack's, which is a change of venue.